We're live once again, and what an extraordinary day to be going live on. Have we just seen the ultimate attacker? Are we seeing Israel torpedo Trump's supposed peace in real time? The Straits of Hormuz apparently were open for a little while, and now they're shut again, based on Israel bombing the hell out of southern Lebanon. But we're also going to look at the attacker, the ultimate attacker, and this episode, the thumbnail I've used, David, is surrendering to tyranny. Why we should not be surprised, because we have Hegseth pandering to a would-be tyrant in Hungary. We have US foreign policy supporting those who are the, I would say, arch-authoritarians and kleptocrats in Europe, not the Democrats and those for transparency. And now we have Trump getting, I mean, this is the ultimate art of the deal, except it's not, potentially coming away with far, far less than the US had when it started out. You've read the 10 points. We're going to jump into that. Before we do, I'd like to introduce my co-host and co-creator of this format, David Debata, and he's going to give a little reminder of the platforms he operates on in case you have not yet subscribed.
Thank you, sir. I call this segment, it's the best of times and the worst of times to steal from Dickens, because it really is.
The best times? I don't know what you're seeing here. I mean, where's the best bit? I see the
Iran.
Worst and the bad and the worst. The bad times
Iran's
and the worst times.
On top of this, for the Iranians, for the Iranian regime anyway.
Oh, well,
we'll get to that in a minute. But as you said, I'd like to at least briefly introduce my channel, which is the No Delusion Zone. Where is it? Somewhere here hiding. Here it is, the No Delusion Zone on YouTube. Please go there. I am simulcasting that now on my channel, but after this, I would suggest, I would hope, I'm asking if folks go over there for some other YouTube videos as well, and also my website, which is protectingtherepublic.com. I am one of the loudest voices about protecting our republic here in the States. So please, protectingtherepublic.com. Take a look, read, watch, and hopefully become a subscriber there as well. And as Jonathan said, we are going to be, of course, focusing on Iran. Let me just throw something up here briefly at the very, very outset, because I really mean this, Jonathan. If anybody's come out ahead on this, a winner, it's the Iranian regime, not the Iranian people so much, but it seems as if, by the way, the Persian culture has at least another 2 weeks to live after their several thousand year in existence or reign. As you said, Trump tacoed again. We knew he would, but I just want to throw something out there also at the beginning. It's kind of an apology, a mea culpa. Yesterday, I talked about genocide, how Trump's reference to destroying, to annihilating the Persian civilization forever, and that it won't come back, was in fact a classic definition of genocide. I failed to mention that he was obviously talking about nuclear destruction, using nuclear weapons, because the only way you can do what he threatened to do was to use large-scale nuclear weapons all over Iran.
And, that was the hint. I mean, that was the clear hint.
Well, that was a clear hint. I said, I didn't say it because in my naivety, I thought it was obvious. So I'm going to just apologize and say, yes, that's what he meant, as well as, the genocidal comment as well. In any event, as we were talking about, look, America lost. We knew America would lose as soon as the first bombs started dropping on Iran. This was an ill-conceived, ill-planned, unplanned exercise in stupidity. And here is the 10-point plan that the Iranians have put forth. And by according to various news sources, not just Iranian, Trump, the American administration, has at least partially accepted this 10-point plan. And you can read it all for yourselves. But I think if this is accepted, a large part of it, at least, America has lost. There's no way that we could come out of this and say we won. Although I'm going to show you a couple of brief videos where Pistol Pete Hegseth says that, in fact, we won. Look, if we accept this, Jonathan, we are saying that America's role and presence in the Middle East is done. They're demanding that America leaves. Look, it says U.S. military withdrawal from the region. We will have to leave all of our military bases. We're going to have to help rebuild Iran, help rebuild the things that we blew up and destroyed. We're going to have to do away with all the sanctions that have been worked on for decades. We're going to have to allow them to enrich uranium, which was, I thought, one of the main reasons for this war. Again, you can read all of this, but if in fact most or all of these 10-point concessions on this plan are accepted by the American administration, this is a total catastrophe. It's not that we came away with, equal or the same as before. We've lost so much as we had just the day before this attack. It's absolutely tragic. That's not what I wanted to pull up. I did want to pull up this. I wanted to show you, and I just mentioned it briefly, the short video clips that Pete Hegseth, the master of disaster and self-proclaimed Secretary of War, said about the American victory in Iran. So just watch this brief video. This was a press conference held, I believe, very early today.
And do you think that your comments may have put American troops at risk?
No. I try to be nice up here, but you did listen to what I said, right? I laid out the objectives. We believe we've accomplished them, and it's a historic military victory. And President Trump has the option, as the commander-in-chief, to compel an adversary to the table, which is precisely what he did. And at the end, he chose to say, you know what, I'd rather talk to you at the table than obliterate your capability to export oil and fund your terror regime. So he did make that choice. That was his choice. He was a president of peace, and he's been willing to make those really tough calls that the American people elected him to do. Nothing we've done, not a single thing we've done, this is a typical, of course it's ABC, not a single thing we've done has put an American troop in more of a harm's way. We've only set our troops up to harm Iranian military capabilities, which they've done to devastating fashion. And to great success. Mr. Chairman, you had a part of that question.
There's a lot in that question. I'd love to take that offline and answer.
That's enough for now. I'm going to show you a photo and then just one more brief video. For those of you that don't know, Pete Hegseth is a born-again Christian nationalist, a radical Christian. What we're looking at here is a Templar cross. It is the same symbol that medieval Christian knights wore when they went into Jerusalem, when they went into Israel during the Crusades. He is a very, very far-right radical Christian, and this is on his chest. And so he couches almost everything he says now, both publicly and privately, as the Secretary of War, as he calls it, under Christian nationalism. So I'm going to play again this one final brief clip about that, about the Christian ideology, the very strong right-wing Christian ideology behind this war in Iran. Just listen to this.
When American airmen were down behind enemy lines, our forces and our president did not hesitate. Special operators supported by elite air crews and intelligence professionals moved swiftly and decisively into treacherous mountain terrain under the constant threat of Iranian forces closing in. Ultimately, it was an impotent Iranian threat. Now, these are not routine operations. They were high-risk, high-stakes missions conducted in the heart of enemy territory. This was not just barely into Iran. This was deep into Iran, involving coordinated strikes to suppress threats, deception tactics to protect our teams, and full synchronization across air, ground, and special operations. The Iranians are still asking themselves right now, how did the Americans do this? One downed airman scaling rugged ridges while hunted by the enemy. When he was finally able to activate his emergency transponder, his first message was simple, and it was powerful. He sent a message, God is good. In that moment of isolation and danger, his faith and fighting spirit shone through. You see, shot down on a Friday, Good Friday, hidden in a cave, a crevice, all of Saturday, and rescued on Sunday. flown out of Iran as the sun was rising on Easter Sunday. A pilot reborn, all home and accounted for, a nation rejoicing. God is good.
Praise be to God.
That's insane. I mean, that's not only is it insane, it's also deeply manipulative, both of the audience and also of the airmen, of the military. And it would seem to me it breaks down all the tenets of the American Constitution, which is the division between church and state, the division between secular power, church power. It is an extraordinary collapsing of, I would say, civilizational norms. And that's not to denigrate Easter or those who believe, etc. But you essentially are fighting a theocratic regime, that is Iran, and labeling it evil, and yet you are adopting the clothes, the language, and the tone of a Christian theocratic autocracy, which
He's fighting the crusades all over again. I mean, I don't think it could be any more clear.
No, the language is manipulative, the language is disingenuous, the language is deeply terrifying.
Well, you know, and I would say this, Jonathan, I don't have any information for sure, any definitive information, but I question whether that Downs pilot actually said God is good as his first words.
No, I mean, that could turn out to be entirely apocryphal. Will we know?
No.
Would that person speak out?
No.
They may well be in fear of their job, their pension, etc. if they were to speak out against it.
Yes, no, we will never know the truth on that. But the fact that he said that, whether or not it's the truth, is part of this propaganda, this very, very dangerous far-right Christian nationalist propaganda that has taken over the administration, the MAGA Trump administration. It's very, very deeply ingrained in this government, Jonathan. And yes, it's a minority of Christians in the United States by far, but they do control the government. So whether their numbers are small or not, they have the power.
Yeah, that's deeply, deeply disturbing. Let's turn to the actual taco itself, because as you've mentioned here, and then we'll turn to the wider appeasement of authoritarians. It seems from these points that the US, if they were to abide by it, and let's remind ourselves that Trump is well known when he was a businessman for not paying bills, which he thought he could get away with not paying. This may be the same situation here, where he's agreed to things that he has no intention of paying down on or respecting. And maybe, the Iranians have no way to coerce him. Maybe, the Strait of Hormuz will turn into a leverage that will force Trump to actually, relent on the things he's agreed to. But taken at face value, this would seem that what's being given away is potentially enormous compared to the position the US was in at the point they started this joint operation with Israel.
I think, and I said this, it's not at the same point. We have lost so much. Can you imagine, Jonathan, if after all is said and done, we wind up paying for the rebuilding of Iran, that we allow Iran to fully control the Strait of Hormuz, which, correct me if I'm wrong, was one of the reasons we went to war, so they could not put a stranglehold on the Strait of Hormuz. Can you imagine if we have actually buttressed, increased, enlarged the economy of Iran based on what we did? Can you imagine if now China and Russia, North Korea, and all these other bad actors supply more arms, more technology to Iran than before? And again, can you imagine now that if the United States has to abandon all of our decades-long military installations in the Middle East, think of all of the infrastructure we built, the tens of billions, trillions of dollars actually, that we've poured into just the Gulf region alone. If we are forced to leave there, which this 10-point plan says we would have to if we accept that, not only is this a major humiliation and setback for the United States, it is an economic, military, and diplomatic catastrophe.
This is it. But, it gets worse, because in the process of launching this, the US has also burned a lot of international credibility. It has further sought to coerce and pressure allies to join its illegal war. And it's not just the illegality that has put Europeans off assisting. It's the fact that Trump spent the last year threatening them and their sovereignty, to the point where Denmark was preparing to have a direct military confrontation with the US, and many European allies would have stepped in to support them, essentially pitting them against US forces. So on the backdrop of that, Trump has put another nail in the coffin of not just NATO and the relationship, but just trust, just simple trust in a long-standing ally. I think worse than that, though, because we see many of these sort of Republican talking points that, Europe hasn't done this, hasn't done that, blah, blah, blah. And one can say in relation to Russia, Europe has been weak, lax, and so on. And we are complicit, along with Biden and others, in not deterring Russia to start the war against Ukraine. So there's a lot of culpability there on all sides. But in this instance, we're looking at the US, which is not behaving as an ally, that is behaving as an adversary, then trying to make us complicit not only in a war that is ostensibly illegal and which could involve war crimes, but also a war which has no clear outcome, no clear exit strategy. And indeed, when the initial decapitation operation failed, there was no plan B. And I don't think there is a plan B at this point at all, given the Iranian regime is stuck in there. So this trust has been burnt. And of course, many commentators are talking about it just on that level. And they're talking about Europe having been dependent on the US militarily. Well, to an extent, yes. But if we were to say how economically dependent actually has the US military industrial complex been on its allies, and we look at it as a sort of monetary tally, we would find that actually trillions of dollars, trillions of euros, or whatever you want to account it in, over the last decades and during the period of the Cold War has flowed from Europe into the US, into its military industrial complex. So not only is trust being burnt, America under Trump is burning its economic model, burning its allies, burning their wallets. That money is now going to be invested in European defense. Europe is waking up. We're going to be investing that in our own defense, our own capability, our own production lines. And some of that is going to be going towards Ukraine, which is going to become the munitions, let's say the munitions center of Europe, munitions that work. And Europe has the US has burnt its own economic model. That doesn't get mentioned nearly enough.
Well, let me say something else that doesn't get mentioned nearly enough, at least in the mainstream media here in the United States, and I think in Europe as well. The mainstream media is falling all over itself about the so-called cracks in MAGA and how the war in Iran has finally let them see the light. We're talking about the Joe Rogans and the Alex Joneses and the Marjorie Taylor Greens and so forth and so on that are finally saying, oh my God, I can't believe I supported this man. He's insane. This is so wrong.
Alex Jones called for not just impeachment, he called for the 25th.
Well, let me a couple of points on this. Of points on that. Number one, there's no huge cracks in MAGA. It's not happening. It's a cult. I don't know how many times I and millions of others have to say that. It's a cult. When the cults get bad news about their leader, they don't sit back and do some critical thinking, read and look for all the information so they can analyze it and come up with a rational solution. No, they do this and they don't listen and they continue to support their cult leader. Not only that, let's talk about the lame ass Democrats who I, regularly attack as much as I can. There was a story today in the lame ass, again, mainstream media that 50 Democrats called for the impeachment. 50? There's over 300 of them.
How many Democrats are there?
200 of them in the House. 50 called for his impeachment. It should be 100%.
Yes.
And it goes without saying that the Democrats, the MAGA lemmings, the MAGA morons in the Congress and the Senate should also be calling for his impeachment. He is dangerously insane. Jonathan, he just called for a nuclear war, for destroying an entire civilization so it never returns. That's
and
okay.
then instead of a nuclear war, I'm glad he tacoed in a way, but
Yes,
then
but the
he gave
threat,
away 100 times more than a bomber ever gave away to
look,
Iran.
as I'm
in
saying,
that
we
taco.
lost big
Yeah.
time no matter what. But the very threat of a
Yeah, the very
nuclear
threat
war
itself, yeah.
to destroy an entire civilization so that it never returns, if that's not enough for this cowardly Congress to file articles of impeachment, it never will. And so I guess my point is MAG is not cracking. Not only that, the Democrats still don't have a spine. This
Yeah.
administration is going to continue. It's going to continue up to this November's election. And if they do what they claim to do, which is to control the elections, they're going to win the elections. Not really, but they'll control the votes. And then they'll go on to 2028, do the same thing. I hate to say it. I don't see the Republicans losing or going anywhere for the foreseeable future.
That's a concern, of course, and that's why
Yes.
many are appeasing, because they're simply waiting for Trump to self-destruct so they don't have to take any kind of stand themselves or publicly tarnish themselves by breaking with the team. It's all very well, some of those Republicans that are out there criticizing Trump, saying that they have conversations behind the scenes, and everyone comes up to me and says this and that and the other. No, they have to do it publicly. They have to break publicly. They have to demonstrably show they're no longer behind this guy. The costs are going to continue to mount. No, we've still got 3 years of this. Unless someone steps up at some point, we've got 3 years of this. So he's tacoed in Iran and is going to cost the US billions in the short term, trillions in the long term, based on the trust that's been absolutely denigrated and burnt between allies. He will destroy the military-industrial complex of the US. At the same time, we have an interesting trend. Now, Trump is not an innovator. He's a grifter. He is not someone who will transform and pivot the US towards the genuine challenges. These challenges, I think, are empire-ending, and that is that Ukraine and the innovations that it has brought about in the battlefield, the capability of let's say, driving down unit cost, iterating technology on a near real-time basis. To achieve that, it has to be very much embedded within civic society. We've seen you cannot reproduce the Ukrainian military ecosystem, I think, in an authoritarian country. An authoritarian country can buy and steal those ideas and scale them up, absolutely. But to originate those ideas, which are coming out of Ukraine, you have to have a deeply democratic society. You have to have some bedrock of values. These would seem to be, let's say, in abeyance or ineffective in America. We know that through the Cold War, actually innovation and values were very strongly present, which helped the resistance to Russia. But it seemed that those are now ineffectual. I won't say they don't exist, because there are many tens and tens of millions of Americans who do have those strong values and are appalled by what's going on and try and do their individual bit. But there isn't a threshold of this anymore to make a difference. What we're about to see is the large American primes, the high-end, high-margin manufacturers, are going to have their butts handed to them. Their piece of cheese, to use that business analogy, is going to disappear overnight, and it's going to go to Ukraine. Now, what's your view on that? But also what Trump is here doing, if he's going to withdraw from the Middle East, well, someone has to fill that vacuum. Some countries are going to try to appease Iran and Russia and the axis of authoritarians. Some countries are going to call Ukraine in to fill the vacuum that Trump has absented here. I think this whole thing is going to rebound in a way that neither Trump nor Putin nor China envisaged in this, nor Iran, and that is to elevate Ukraine to become a global military power.
Well, let me just say that I said months ago, maybe it was more than 2 years ago now, that Ukraine is now the standard bearer for Western democracy and innovation, which is also what you're talking about. So, of course, I agree with you. Let me take it back to what you said about America. Look, this is not a new problem in America. It actually predates Trump by decades. What I mean is the hollowing out of American manufacturing by sending it overseas, by American companies, the biggest companies, offshoring and getting the cheapest possible labor, which meant tens of millions of Americans who used to be able to have a very comfortable middle-class life working in American manufacturing and making quality products were out of a job. That's been festering in middle America now for decades, and really was a large part for the formation of MAGA. Before that, it was called the Tea Party, actually. That was a direct outgrowth in the early 2000s of what I'm just talking about, the hollowing out of American manufacturing. It then, Obama came onto the scene, which actually, I'm sorry to say, furthered that trend, because a lot of the same people that were thrown out of their factory jobs did not like having a black president. So that just increased the ranks of the Republicans, which eventually became MAGA. It's worse now than ever. America can't make anywhere near the amount of products that we need. Talk about defense, and Ukraine being the innovation laboratory right now for Western democracy. America right now can't make anywhere near the amount of, for example, artillery shells, small arms shells, artillery, tanks, even though they're outdated. We can't make those. We're laughably behind in the construction, the design, and manufacturing of drones, for example. We're fighting the last war, and even if we didn't, we don't have the manufacturing base. So you put all this together, the lack of manufacturing, the loss of jobs of the core, the central middle class of America, which has propelled MAGA and Donald Trump into the positions that we're in. And America's in really, really bad shape. Trump speaks directly to them, whether he's a madman and a lunatic. They feel it. They understand. They're still angry at the fact that they don't have a good job. And they blame the Democrats for that, which is ludicrous because it's been going on for decades. But the Democrats don't know how to speak, don't have good messaging. So the Republicans dump it all on the Democrats. And guess what? That sells. And that's why the Republicans won. I don't believe they would win a legitimate election in November, but as we just discussed, I don't think they're going to allow that to happen. Fast forwarding to Ukraine and what you're talking about, they're it. I mean, I can't tell you how proud I am of them. I've written dozens of articles and spoken on many, many podcasts about, again, how they are the standard bearer. They are the shining city on the hill, if you will, that's replaced America as the democracy to look up to. Yes, they have problems. No, Zelensky's not Superman, but he's pretty damn good. And in a time of war, he's pulled their ass out of the fire. Excuse me if you don't like ass, YouTube, but I'm going to say it. And so they are the country that Western democracies now should look up to. They may well wind up supplying the military to NATO, if NATO even exists in a few years. So America's done. Look, they've burned themselves. Trump has put the last nail in the coffin with this war in Iran. Nobody believes them. Our credibility is gone. Our economy is just about ready to go. We probably will pull out of NATO. I was
going to say that's the other big consequence, isn't it? I mean, that's the next pivot.
It all comes down to Ukraine.
Yeah.
It all comes down to Ukraine. Whether Ukraine allows NATO to stay together and even exist as an organization, I don't know. But Western democracy right now depends on Ukraine, not America.
And this is the next pivot, because this is the other thing I think some people have picked up on, but not everyone. And that is that if there's a full tackle on this, and it's not guaranteed that the ceasefire is going to hold, it's not guaranteed at all that he's going to actually do the things that he's apparently agreed to. And even then, you have to raise the question whether the things he's agreed to can be done by executive decision, or whether they need some further legislative approval. That hasn't stopped him before, but there may well be things he's agreed to which he does not technically have the authority to do. But he can't stop there. He can't go back to, right, we're now going to go into peaceful times, because he has that, Epstein will return. All his other crimes will return. The huge money-making schemes on placing bets every time he sort of make an announcement during this crisis, that's going to be brought up by certain people, and not enough, but certain people. He's going to have more wars. He's going to have to target Cuba, which he's been talking about. He's going to have to start on Greenland again, which he started doing.
The peace president is going to have to start more
NATO
war?
again.
The peace president, you mean?
Yeah, the peace president, the one that deserves the Nobel Prize, exactly. He cannot exist with peacetime headlines and a peacetime cadence and tempo in that. He's going to have to initiate more and more and more chaos, and this is escalatory. I think that's also reflected by the tone of his language. I mean, it's quite clear that his genocidal threat, now we know he had no intention to go through with it, but it still talks to a kind of escalation in terms of his desperation, in terms of the intensity and threat level of the language that he's willing to use. Well, he can't really, dial it back too much from that. This is an escalatory cycle of rhetoric that he's on. So my question is, what next?
Well, and we've said this many, many times on this series, as well as others. He needs to keep his pedal to the metal, to keep wars happening, to stay out of prison. He knows that. Instinctively, he knows that, although cognitively, he can't think of 1 minute to the next. He knows that he needs to start new chaos. He needs to start new wars, new controversies. So the media headlines keep him out of prison. Let me ask you this in the remaining minutes that we have. Who's going to win the Hungarian?
He's a fire starter. To quote that famous song, he is a fire starter.
Well, there's also a movie to that for sci-fi fans, but that's another issue. Yes, he is a fire starter. I wish he would be a fire breather. Maybe he'd burn himself out. Jonathan, who's going to win the Hungarian election?
Well, this is an interesting one. I mean, certainly technically, Orban is going to lose. I think that's fairly sure. But there is a key split between the city and the countryside. The countryside tends to be more for Orban. Cities far less so. He's going to try to gerrymander and steal that election within his capability. I rather suspect that he hasn't, how should I say it? He hasn't slid far enough in terms of the state capture. I mean, he's managed to capture a lot of the state, but he didn't go far enough, or as far as Georgia Dream, for instance. I don't think he'd be able to out and out steal the result. I don't think he'd be able to weather the storm that would rise up in the main urban centers if he was to try to steal it. And Vance, I don't know what that's going to add in terms of value. To my mind, that simply denigrates the US. It doesn't provide any advantage whatsoever. What's interesting is, in conversation with some of my Republican friends, my pro-Ukraine Republican friends, they absolutely understand, one, that Orban is a Kremlin puppet. I think some of them privately, some of them to me privately have said they understand that Vance has explicitly made a deal with the devil here. Vance has thrown his lot in with Kremlin-aligned agents, and therefore, this is interesting. They wouldn't hear of me say that against Trump, because one, they're not sure if it's true, but two, they're still trying to influence Trump. They're still trying to get messages through to him, and there's a certain sort of cult-like protection of him. But Vance, they're quite happy to say, no, this guy is all in with the Kremlin. He's really bad news. He has absolutely no scruples, and he's already on the side of tyranny. He's already prepared to build his base and fully align with the tyrannies of the world, the autocrats and kleptocrats of the world. Seeing him visibly in Hungary just reinforces that. But what they've also told me is that, unfortunately, even amongst Republicans who are pro-Ukraine, there's very little understanding of how far and how bad Orban is. There's just a sheer ignorance of the fact that he's a Kremlin agent. So I think a lot more communication, a lot more education is required here. The good news is it seems that Republicans and MAGA are sort of receptive, perhaps, to the idea that Orban is a bad lot. And Vance is almost certainly not helped by his association here.
Well, you've probably read the same polls that I have. It seems that actually Orban himself is way behind in the polls, but his party is not. And that, if you believe the polls, and I don't, that's very dangerous. But if the polls turn out to be correct, he may lose, but his party may win enough seats that they will still control the government, which means that whoever is the new leader of Hungary will not be able to overturn or change most of the most critical Russia-friendly laws and policies that Orban put into place. I guess, that would be too bad. But as long as he was defeated, at least that would be a start to cleaning up the stench that's been going on for, I think it's the last 15 or 16 years under Orban. But we'll have to wait and see. The election is Sunday. And you're right. J.D. Vance is doing himself no favors, at least here. With the majority of the American public. Of course, the MAGA cult kisses his ass. Something to remember for those folks that may not think about it. Even if the American Congress did impeach Trump and have him convicted in the Senate, which ain't gonna happen, but if it did, guess who would be the president? J.D. Vance. So, we're in a real conundrum here, Jonathan.
I mean, that is an extremely dangerous circumstance there. But the alignment of U.S. national security is already kind of baked in. The alignment with the autocrats and kleptocrats is actually enshrined in U.S. foreign policy. It's already there in black and white, as well as in Project 2025. So we have to be realistic here, and that only the total expulsion of Trump/Vance or whoever's going to take over is going to offer any hope of having a reset, albeit temporary. I mean, at least a respite for 4 years may help the right people come to the fore. But this challenge is not over, and we can cover this in a future episode. A friend of mine, Vlad Vexler, positions what we're seeing now as a dress rehearsal for full autocracy. He doesn't talk about, Trump being Hitler or this being, an out-and-out tyranny, because, of course, it's not. They haven't fully captured the state. They haven't got that far, and they probably won't get that far within the terms of this, the limits of this term. No matter how bad it still gets, it's not going to get to the point where they've captured everything and totally destroyed all vestiges of democracy. They won't achieve that.
Illiberal democracy, which is the term.
But it's a dress rehearsal for someone who is perhaps a bit more intentional, perhaps a bit more compelling, more devious, more powerful, more eloquent. Someone who can come in, 4 years, 8 years, however long it takes. This is a dress rehearsal for a bigger fight.
I think and I've said this many, many times, I hate to keep repeating myself, we here in America are in for a generational fight. I don't believe the MAGA, the Republicans, are going to let go of their power in this election, not because they're not going to try. I believe that they will lose in a fair election. I just don't believe they're going to allow a fair election. They're going to control the vote counting. And they're going to win. And the same thing in 2008. We're going to have to wait for this generation of MAGA to die out, I guess is what I'm saying.
We are. And I don't want to make it in a pure left or right thing here, because what's happened is it's been seen that illiberal forces can take huge swathes of power with almost no resistance to them. That degradation of political culture could be used by an authoritarian on the hard left. It could also be used by an authoritarian on the hard right or left. It could be used by either. And politics tends to pivot and swing and slosh about uncontrollably like water in a bathtub. So unfortunately, the precedents that are set, the illiberal, anti-democratic precedents, and the tools that are being introduced from the authoritarian playbook, here's a warning to everyone. They could be used by the left as well as the right. And
that's happening in Germany. you've got a fascist left winger there. I forget the woman's name, Vilder I forget her name.
The AfD. Yeah.
Well, yeah, she's with the AfD, but she's came from the DDR, the communist East Germany, and now she's a far leftist, but she is an authoritarian. And no mistake about it.
It's the red-brown alliance. It's the the horseshoe theory, and absolutely embodied by that. Well, we're going to probably wind it up here. We've hit 40 minutes. We've had some great comments, brilliant moderation from our fantastic moderators. Vigo's been on fire today with his comments as well. Thank you to everyone for joining us.
Keep those questions coming. That's part of what we really, really want to do. We want interaction with you, the folks that are watching this. We want you to chime in, to put in your 2 cents, hopefully no insults or threats, of course, but we encourage your questions and open debate. So please join us next time and ask some questions.
Absolutely. Until tomorrow.
Take care.